At 78, I was choosing between destroying my liver or living with pain so severe I prayed I wouldn't wake up. That's when I discovered something in my dusty spice cabinet that doctors said was impossible. Complete pain relief in just 7 days using a 50-cent ingredient that's been hiding in your kitchen right now. What happened next defied everything modern medicine told me about aging and chronic pain. I held that orange prescription bottle in my trembling hands, staring at the warning label that read, "May cause liver damage with prolonged use." After 12 years of chronic pain, I had reached the point where I was choosing between destroying my liver or living with agony that made every sunrise feel like a curse. That's when something extraordinary happened. Something so simple that it sounds almost insulting to the $47,000 I had spent on treatments that failed me. At 78 years old, living here in Lincoln, Nebraska, I discovered that the answer to my decade-long nightmare was sitting forgotten in my spice cabinet, covered in dust, costing less than my morning coffee. In just 7 days, this ancient golden powder gave me back something I thought was gone forever: the ability to wake up without fear. My name is Martha, and I'm about to share something that will either sound like complete nonsense or the most important thing you'll hear this year. Because what happened to me defied everything my doctors told me about aging, about pain, and about what's possible when you're willing to try something that sounds too simple to be true. But before I tell you what changed everything, let me paint you a picture of what my life had become. Picture waking up each morning, and before you even open your eyes, you're already negotiating with your body. Please, just let me get to the bathroom without wincing. Please let me make coffee without my hands feeling like they're on fire. That was my reality for over a decade. Thanks for joining us here on Voice of Age, a warm space for real talk about life, health, and heart in our later years. The pain didn't announce itself with fanfare. It crept in like a thief in the night, starting with what I dismissed as just getting older. It began in my left knee after I spent an ambitious Saturday afternoon planting my victory garden, something I'd done every spring since retiring from teaching at Lincoln Elementary. I was so proud of those neat rows of tomatoes and peppers, but that pride came with a price I couldn't have imagined. What started as a mild ache became a constant companion. Within months, it had invited its friends to join the party, my right knee, then my hips, then my shoulders, until finally settling into my hands and wrists like an unwelcome house guest who had decided to stay permanently. I went from being the energetic grandmother who could chase Tommy around the yard to someone who watched life happen from the sidelines of my own existence. The truly heartbreaking part wasn't the physical pain, it was watching my world shrink. I stopped volunteering at the church food bank because standing for 2 hours was impossible. I quit my book club because holding a novel for more than 10 minutes made my fingers burn. I even stopped going to Walmart, which, for a Nebraska woman, is like giving up breathing. My neighbor Bob started doing my grocery shopping, and every time he knocked on my door with bags of necessities, I felt another piece of my independence slip away. The medical establishment became my second home. Dr. Peterson at the clinic started me on ibuprofen, then graduated me to stronger NSAIDs when my body adapted. When those began eating holes in my stomach lining, we moved to prescription medications with names I couldn't pronounce and side effects that terrified me. Physical therapy sessions twice a week cost me $80 each after insurance. And while the therapist was kind, the relief never lasted longer than the drive home. The steroid injections were my breaking point. Sitting in that sterile examination room, watching Dr. Peterson prepare that intimidating needle, I realized I was so desperate for relief that I was willing to let someone pierce my spine with chemicals that might help for a few weeks. The temporary relief felt like a cruel joke, just enough hope to keep me coming back, but never enough to actually live. By year 10, I was spending nearly $200 every month on treatments that barely touched my pain. My Medicare statements read like a medical textbook, and my kitchen counter looked like a pharmacy. Bottles of glucosamine, fish oil, turmeric capsules that did nothing, heating pads, cooling gels, and enough pill organizers to stock a small hospital. I was a walking testimonial to the failure of modern pain management. The night everything changed I was sitting in my favorite armchair, the only piece of furniture that didn't cause me agony, staring at that orange prescription bottle. The label warned about liver damage, kidney problems, and a dozen other side effects that could potentially kill me. I realized I was faced with an impossible choice: destroy my organs or live with pain that made me wish I wouldn't wake up tomorrow. That's when the phone rang. My granddaughter Sarah, a registered nurse at Denver General, was calling for our weekly check-in. Through tears, I barely managed to hold back. I told her about my latest doctor visit, about the prescription I was afraid to take, about feeling like I was trapped in a body that had betrayed me. What she said next changed everything. But before I tell you exactly what Sarah suggested, I need you to understand something. I had tried everything. Everything. If you're thinking this is another story about someone who didn't exhaust their medical options, you're wrong. I was 3 specialists, 2 MRIs, and countless treatments past desperation when this conversation happened. If you're dealing with chronic pain, if you're watching your life get smaller each day, if you're tired of being told that suffering is just part of aging, then please hit that subscribe button right now. Because what I'm about to share with you isn't just about one grandmother's journey. It's about hope that exists in the most unexpected places. And I promise you, by the end of this story, you'll understand why I'm sharing something so personal with complete strangers. What happened next sounds impossible, but I have the medical records to prove it. I have the before and after photos. I have the testimony of neighbors who watched me transform from someone who could barely walk to the mailbox into someone who's planning her first vacation in 5 years. Most importantly, I have my life back. And it all started with Sarah's simple question: Grandma, have you ever really tried turmeric? I actually laughed when Sarah asked me about turmeric. Not a joyful laugh, but the bitter sound someone makes when they've heard one too many well-meaning suggestions. Honey, I said, that yellow stuff has been sitting in my spice rack since the Clinton administration. If it could help arthritis, don't you think someone would have figured that out by now? But Sarah's voice carried a weight I hadn't heard before. Grandma, I'm not talking about some internet fad. I'm talking about what we're seeing in the hospital. Patients who've been on pain medications for years are reducing their doses. We have an 82-year-old man who canceled his knee replacement surgery after 6 months of consistent use. The head of our pain management clinic is actually recommending it now. Something in her tone made me stop dismissing and start listening. Sarah had spent 4 years in nursing school and another 6 in one of Denver's busiest hospitals. She wasn't the type to get swept up in health trends or miracle cures. If she was seeing something real, something measurable, then maybe I owed it to myself to investigate. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I got genuinely curious about a potential solution. I opened my laptop and began what would become the most important research project of my retirement. I wasn't looking for testimonials or miracle stories. I wanted science. I wanted proof. I wanted to understand why this ancient spice might succeed where modern medicine had failed me. What I discovered in the medical literature stunned me. The Mayo Clinic's website didn't just mention turmeric. It had an entire section dedicated to curcumin, the active compound responsible for its anti-inflammatory properties. Johns Hopkins had published research showing that curcumin could block the same inflammatory pathways that drugs like ibuprofen target, but without the devastating side effects I'd been experiencing. The University of Arizona had conducted studies proving that curcumin could reduce inflammatory markers in the blood as effectively as some prescription medications. But here's what really caught my attention. Unlike the NSAIDs that have been destroying my stomach lining, curcumin actually protected against gastric damage. It was like discovering that the solution to my problem had been hiding in plain sight all along. I learned that chronic inflammation wasn't just causing my joint pain. It was silently damaging my cardiovascular system, potentially affecting my brain function, and accelerating the aging process throughout my entire body. The research described inflammation as a smoldering fire that never quite goes out, consuming healthy tissue and creating a cascade of problems that went far beyond aching joints. The science was compelling, but what really convinced me was the safety profile. The FDA had designated turmeric as generally recognized as safe, meaning it had been used by millions of people for thousands of years without significant adverse effects. After 12 years of medications that came with warnings about liver damage, kidney problems, and cardiovascular risks, the idea of trying something with such a clean safety record felt like a revelation. I walked to my kitchen and retrieved that dusty jar of turmeric from the depths of my spice cabinet. As I held it in my hands, I realized this wasn't just about trying another remedy. It was about reclaiming some sense of agency over my own body. For too long, I had been a passive recipient of treatments that were done to me rather than something I actively participated in. The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to give this ancient remedy the same serious commitment I had given to every prescription, every therapy session, every expensive treatment that had promised relief. I wasn't going to try it half-heartedly for a few days and give up. I was going to approach it with the same scientific rigor that had convinced me to investigate it in the first place. Standing in the spice aisle at Kroger, reading labels and comparing brands, I felt something I hadn't experienced in over a decade: hope mixed with determination. Not the desperate hope that comes from trying yet another quick fix, but the quiet confidence that comes from making an informed decision based on solid research. I was about to embark on an experiment that would either prove my cynicism justified or restore my faith in the possibility of healing. As I drove home with my bag of carefully selected ingredients, I had no idea that I was about to discover something that would not only change my life, but challenge everything I thought I knew about aging, pain, and the power of simple natural solutions. Understanding why turmeric works required me to confront an uncomfortable truth about my own body. I had been living with a medical condition I didn't even know existed. Chronic inflammation, I learned, was like having a fire burning inside my joints, my tissues, my very cells. But unlike acute inflammation that signals injury and promotes healing, this fire never extinguished itself. It just kept burning day after day, year after year, slowly consuming my quality of life. The research revealed something profound about curcumin's mechanism of action. Unlike the NSAIDs that had been masking my pain by blocking symptoms, curcumin actually addressed the root cause by inhibiting specific enzymes called COX-2 and 5-LOX that trigger inflammatory responses. It was like the difference between turning off a smoke alarm and actually putting out the fire. For the first time in years, I wasn't just managing pain, I was potentially stopping the process that created it. What fascinated me most was learning that curcumin's bioavailability, its ability to be absorbed and used by the body, was dramatically enhanced by a simple compound found in black pepper. Piperine, the substance that gives pepper its bite, could increase curcumin absorption by up to 2,000%. This wasn't folk wisdom or kitchen magic. This was peer-reviewed biochemistry that explained why ancient Ayurvedic practitioners have been combining these spices for millennia. Standing in my kitchen that first evening, I approached the preparation with the reverence of someone conducting a scientific experiment. I wasn't just making a beverage. I was creating a precise delivery system for compounds that could potentially restore my body's natural anti-inflammatory balance. The golden milk recipe I had researched wasn't arbitrary. Each ingredient served a specific biochemical purpose. The organic turmeric powder I had selected contained standardized levels of curcumin, ensuring consistent potency. The coconut oil provided the fat-soluble environment necessary for optimal absorption. The oat milk offered additional anti-inflammatory omega-3 fatty acids while creating a creamy base that would be gentle on my sensitive stomach. Even the fresh ginger contributed its own anti-inflammatory compounds, creating a synergistic effect that was greater than the sum of its parts. As I heated the mixture on low flame, stirring constantly with a wooden spoon, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't passive consumption of another treatment. This was active participation in my own healing. The gentle heat released aromatic compounds that filled my kitchen with scents that seemed to awaken something ancient in my cellular memory. The golden color that bloomed in the milk reminded me that I was working with something that had sustained human health for thousands of years. The taste was unlike anything I had experienced, earthy and warming, with subtle complexity that revealed itself slowly. There was nothing artificial about it, nothing that screamed medicine or treatment. It tasted like nourishment, like something my body had been quietly craving without my conscious awareness. As I sipped it slowly, I could feel the warmth spreading through my chest, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was giving my body exactly what it needed. What struck me most profoundly was the cost comparison. This month's supply of ingredients cost me $18, less than what I typically spent on a single prescription copay. The economic absurdity of my situation became clear. I had been spending thousands of dollars on treatments that addressed symptoms while ignoring a solution that cost less than a restaurant meal and actually addressed the underlying cause of my suffering. But this wasn't just about money, it was about reclaiming my autonomy. Instead of being dependent on pharmaceutical companies, insurance approvals, and doctor appointments, I was taking control of my health using ingredients I could purchase at any grocery store in America. The empowerment was as healing as the anti-inflammatory effects I hoped to experience. As I prepared for bed that first night, cradling my warm mug of golden milk, I realized I wasn't just trying another remedy. I was embarking on a journey back to my own body's innate wisdom. Tomorrow would begin my 7-day experiment. But tonight, for the first time in years, I fell asleep with anticipation instead of dread about what morning would bring. Day 1 arrived with the familiar choreography of chronic pain. The careful assessment of joint stiffness before attempting to sit up, the mental preparation required for each movement, the resigned acceptance that discomfort would be my constant companion. I drank my golden milk that first evening with the weary skepticism of someone who had been disappointed too many times to embrace hope easily. The taste was foreign, yet oddly comforting, like a distant memory my body recognized but my mind couldn't quite place. By day 2, something subtle had shifted in my sleep patterns. Instead of the usual 4 interruptions that had plagued my nights for years, I woke only twice, and returning to sleep didn't require the careful repositioning and negotiation with my aching joints that had become my nightly ritual. When morning came, the customary stiffness that made me feel like a rusted machine was present, but softer somehow, as if someone had applied oil to my internal mechanisms. The third day brought my first moment of genuine surprise. I was reaching for my coffee mug when I realized I hadn't performed my usual morning hand exercises, the slow, deliberate flexing and stretching that had become as essential as breathing. My fingers moved with a fluidity I hadn't experienced in months, and when I gripped the mug, there was strength there that felt almost foreign. I found myself opening and closing my hands repeatedly, marveling at the absence of the grinding sensation that had accompanied every grip for so long. Day 4 delivered what I can only describe as a revelation disguised as an ordinary moment. I was walking to my mailbox, a journey that had required careful planning and frequent rest stops, when I suddenly realized I was moving at a normal pace without conscious effort. My steps were confident, my posture more upright, and most remarkably, I wasn't anticipating pain with each footfall. The mental energy I had been unconsciously dedicating to pain management was suddenly available for other things, like noticing the way the autumn light filtered through my neighbor's maple tree. The 5th day brought an emotional breakthrough that caught me completely off guard. My grandson Tommy arrived for his weekly visit, and as he ran toward me with his usual exuberant energy, I instinctively knelt down to his level, something I hadn't done in over 2 years. We spent the next hour building an elaborate fort from sofa cushions, with me crawling in and out of our creation, pretending to be various animals while he dissolved into giggles. When I finally stood up, I was shocked to realize I'd been on my knees for an extended period without a single thought about how I would manage to get back up. Day 6 marked a return to something I thought I had lost forever: spontaneity. When my book club friend Eleanor called to invite me to a last-minute coffee at the downtown cafe, I said yes without the usual mental calculations about walking distance, seating comfort, and exit strategies. sitting across from her at a small table, gesturing animatedly as we discussed our latest read. I felt like I was inhabiting my own body again rather than being held hostage by it. The seventh day brought an experience that still moves me to tears when I recall it. I woke up naturally without the jarring interruption of pain and lay in bed for several minutes just listening to my body. The chronic tension that had been my constant companion, the low-level alert system that had been monitoring every joint and muscle, had quieted to a whisper. I rose from bed with the kind of fluid movement I remembered from decades past, and as I stood in my kitchen preparing my morning coffee, I was overwhelmed by a profound sense of gratitude. What struck me most deeply wasn't just the reduction in pain, it was the return of possibility. For years, I had been living in a contracted world where every decision was filtered through the lens of physical limitation. Now, suddenly, I was making plans again, accepting invitations, engaging with life instead of merely enduring it. The inflammation that had been silently shaping my choices, my relationships, and my sense of self had begun to release its grip, and I was remembering what it felt like to be Martha again. Not just a collection of symptoms wrapped in resignation. 3 months into my turmeric journey, I sat across from Dr. Peterson during my regular checkup, watching his eyebrows raise as he reviewed my blood work. My inflammatory markers had dropped to levels he hadn't seen in my chart for over a decade. "Martha," he said, setting down the papers, "whatever you're doing, keep doing it. We might be able to reduce your prescription NSAIDs by half." For the first time in years, I was having a conversation with my doctor about reducing medications rather than adding them. But the real transformation went far deeper than blood tests and prescriptions. I had spent so many years accommodating my pain, rearranging my life around its demands, that I had forgotten what it felt like to move through the world without constant negotiation. Now, simple acts like reaching for items on high shelves or bending to pick up dropped keys happened without the mental preparation that had become second nature. My body was no longer a source of anxiety. It was becoming a trusted partner again. The evening ritual of preparing my golden milk had evolved into something sacred, a daily act of self-care that connected me to my own healing. As I stirred the warm, fragrant mixture each night, I wasn't just preparing a beverage. I was participating in my own restoration. The kitchen filled with the earthy aroma of turmeric and ginger, creating an atmosphere of intention and hope that had been absent from my life for far too long. What surprised me most was how this simple change rippled outward into every aspect of my existence. With more energy and less pain, I began making different choices about how to spend my days. I resumed my morning walks, first just to the corner and back, then gradually extending my route until I was walking the full perimeter of my neighborhood. I rejoined the church choir, my voice somehow stronger when my body wasn't constantly fighting inflammation. I even started planning a visit to see Sarah in Denver, something that had seemed impossible just months earlier. The social transformation was equally profound. Pain had made me insular, causing me to decline invitations and avoid activities that might exacerbate my discomfort. Now I found myself saying yes to coffee dates, volunteering again at the food bank, and even hosting my book club for the first time in 3 years. Friends commented that I seemed more like myself, and I realized that chronic pain had been slowly erasing parts of my personality that I had assumed were gone forever. The financial relief was staggering. My monthly healthcare expenses had dropped from over /200 to less than /50, and the money I saved allowed me to make choices based on joy rather than just necessity. I bought art supplies and rediscovered my love of watercolor painting. I purchased a plane ticket to visit my sister in Oregon. I even splurged on organic groceries, choosing foods that supported the anti-inflammatory lifestyle I was embracing. Perhaps most importantly, I learned that healing doesn't have to be complicated or expensive to be profound. The solution that had eluded countless specialists and expensive treatments was sitting in my spice cabinet, waiting for me to approach it with the right combination of knowledge, consistency, and faith. This wasn't about abandoning modern medicine. It was about reclaiming my role as an active participant in my own health. As I sit here now, pain-free and full of plans for the future, I understand that my journey with turmeric gave me something more valuable than symptom relief. It gave me back my agency. At 78, I'm not just managing my health, I'm actively nurturing it. I'm not just surviving my golden years, I'm thriving in them. And if this stubborn Nebraska grandmother can transform her relationship with pain using something as simple as turmeric, perhaps there's hope for anyone willing to approach their own healing with patience, consistency, and the courage to try something beautifully simple. Looking back on this journey, I realized that my story isn't really about turmeric at all. It's about the profound transformation that happens when we stop accepting limitations as permanent and start believing that healing is possible at any age. For 12 years, I had unconsciously surrendered to the narrative that chronic pain was simply the price of aging, that my shrinking world was inevitable, that my best days were behind me. But what I discovered in that dusty spice jar was something far more powerful than an anti-inflammatory compound. I found proof that we're never too old to reclaim our vitality. The deepest lesson from my experience is that sometimes the most profound solutions hide in plain sight, dismissed because of their simplicity. We live in a culture that equates complexity with effectiveness, expense with value, and credentials with truth. But nature doesn't operate by those rules. The same earth that produces the most sophisticated pharmaceuticals also provides simple remedies that have sustained human health for millennia. The key isn't choosing between modern medicine and ancient wisdom. It's learning to integrate both thoughtfully. What struck me most profoundly was realizing how much mental and emotional energy I had been dedicating to pain management without even recognizing it. When that constant background noise of discomfort finally quieted, I discovered reserves of creativity, joy, and engagement that I thought were lost forever. This taught me that chronic conditions don't just affect our bodies, they reshape our entire relationship with possibility itself. The practical application of this lesson extends far beyond joint pain. Whatever challenge you're facing, whether it's physical discomfort, emotional burden, or simply the weight of accumulated years, consider that the solution might be simpler than you imagine. It might not require expensive interventions or dramatic lifestyle overhauls. Sometimes healing begins with one small, consistent action performed with intention and faith. The courage to try something different, even when it seems too simple to work, can open doors you didn't even know existed. As I prepare my golden milk each evening, I'm reminded that taking care of ourselves isn't selfish, it's essential. When we feel better, we show up differently for our families, our communities, and our own dreams. Age doesn't have to mean resignation. Our later years can be a time of continued growth, healing, and discovery if we're willing to approach them with curiosity rather than surrender. I'm curious about your experience with simple solutions that surprise you with their effectiveness. Have you ever discovered something that worked better than you expected? Something that seemed too basic to be powerful? Please share your story in the comments below. I read every single one and love learning from your experiences. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support gives us the motivation to continue sharing real stories about real people finding hope and healing in unexpected places. Together, we can challenge the notion that our best years are behind us and prove that every day offers new possibilities for wellness and joy.